What's up, everybody? Mike Walsh here. So today I want to talk about whether or not Islam Makhachev hurt his own legacy by defeating Ian Garry. Now that may sound very counterintuitive, as well it should, but bear with me here. I've seen a range of reactions to this fight. I've seen the Islam fans just celebrate it. I've seen a couple of people be of the camp that I am, where I actually didn't have Islam in the number one spot in terms of the GOAT conversation prior to this fight, but now do after the fact. So I don't consider myself an Islam fanboy nor an Islam hater. I think I try to view the guy objectively. And additionally, I'm seeing lots of haters out there trashing the dude. And I'm seeing, in general, I feel like the attitude towards him worse after the fact than it was before. I feel like people, because it was a competitive fight, because Islam didn't look unstoppable, because it wasn't a cakewalk, and because you've got some lunatic saying that Garry actually should have won the fight, because of all that, I feel like the general public perception of Islam is actually worse after the fact. And I wonder if he would have been better served just retiring after the JDM win, if people overall would view him more favorably. Again, with some exceptions like myself, where I view him better now, I rank him higher now. But yeah, my reading, my sort of impression of the overall aggregate, the zeitgeist of the MMA community is that, yeah, he's held in lower regard now than he was before. And it makes me wonder if hypothetically he had just retired on the spot after beating JDM, if he would have been more celebrated and maybe ranked higher. We'll see how everyone's end of the year GOAT lists and shit go. But I wonder if he would be more highly regarded in that case. And that shouldn't be how it goes, but in real life, that's a real thing when it comes to how people interpret your greatness and interpret your legacy. There is a combination of sort of ending on a high note bias and not souring everyone's last impressions of you by losing, and certainly by going on a long losing streak, right? Like Tony Ferguson. If Tony Ferguson had just retired after beating Cerrone, I believe, was the last win on his run, his 13 fight win streak or whatever it was. If he just got injured after that and retired or something, he'd be a lot more fondly regarded and remembered and taken more seriously as a great lightweight than he is now that he fell off a fucking cliff after the fact, right? So there's that. There's just, leave on a high. It's the George Costanza thing, right? The episode where George discovers that he can just tell one good joke in a meeting and then just leave on the high note and everyone will like him. It's that kind of a phenomenon, right? Additionally, and this is the more kind of insidious side of it, is people will, as long as you haven't lost yet, people will kind of give you credit for the potential they think you have, for the wins you could get in their minds. And that's true whether you retire on top or whether you're just currently on top and haven't yet been defeated, right? So I've brought up Merab Dvalishvili with this one, where prior to losing to Peter Yan in the rematch, a lot of people were really high on Merab. They were really starting to push him into the top tier of the GOAT conversation. And I haven't seen people totally walk that back and be oh, he sucks, actually, he was a fraud, blah, blah. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen the pendulum totally reverse on him the way it maybe has for Ilia Topuria. But I think people have pumped the brakes on Merab's greatness. But it's well, he still has the same wins, right? It's not like all the wins got erased. It's his record in terms of the win streak is the same as it was before. Yeah. But I think what happens is people see you on that win streak and you look unstoppable, and they don't assume you're just going to lose the next fucking fight. They assume you're going to keep winning. So when they're, again, assessing you, they're sort of implicitly giving you credit for shit that hasn't actually happened yet. And the same thing with someone like Khabib or George St. Pierre, where you retire on top, people sort of, again, not only does that leave on a high note, not only does that leave them with a good taste in their mouth rather than a sour taste, but additionally, the door is open, right? They feel like you left when you still had some gas in the tank, that there were still some gains to be had, right? There was still stuff on the table for you to take that you just chose not to. And since you could have taken it, again, they sort of give you implicit credit for it. Whereas if you had just lost, right, like that seals the deal, right? Like that just tells us, like, no, this is your limit. This was as far as you could go. Dunzo. There's no hypothetical, like, what if, how much further could he have gone? None of that's there. Think of like Fedor Emelianenko. If Fedor had just retired after beating Brett Rogers when he was like 31-0 effectively, like people would still to this day, I think, hold him in higher regard. The fact that he lost after that and was never the same, like that hurt him in people's view, right? Now, there's dynamics at play there, right? Like if you lose during your prime, that's different than losing post-prime, right? So like I would argue that Tony Ferguson, Fedor, when those guys started losing, they were already past their prime. They're very comparable in terms of like the arcs of their careers and their ages. You could see those guys aging out during their win streaks. You see Fedor getting worse kind of after the Tim Sylvia fight. You see Tony Ferguson kind of getting worse after the RDA fight. So to me, I don't hold it against them that they started losing at some point. That will happen to anyone. If Khabib Nurmagomedov just kept fighting forever, he would eventually go on a big losing streak, right? It's just he got out early. Other guys, like, they lose more in their primes. Jose Aldo losing to Conor, stuff like that. With Merab, it's iffy, right? Because he's 34 and he's got a high-paced style. He'd had a million fights in the one year. Is he starting to deteriorate? That is a question. The fact that he lost in a rematch to a guy who prior to that was probably his best win is a bad look, right? So there's additional factors involved. It's not merely that this bias I'm describing of like giving people credit for shit they haven't yet done got erased in his case. It's not merely that caused people to pull back a bit in terms of his like goatness, in terms of him being in that top tier in the GOAT discussion. But again, like that, like it's a factor. And why, circling back to Islam, like he's not yet lost. Don't get me wrong. I mean, some people are, again, like lunatics are trying to say that Garry should have won, but like he didn't lose. He just had a competitive fight. And that makes me think of Georges St-Pierre. Georges St-Pierre retired on top. He came back, won a second belt, then retired on top again. That's all well and good. But the Hendricks fight, people didn't like. It was a close fight. It was closer than Garry and Islam was. It very much could have gone to Johnny Hendricks. I don't think it was a robbery. I think you can make an argument that Pierre won. But it was nip tuck, and Hendricks overperformed. He was like a pretty big underdog, I think. So for Pierre to immediately retire after that, go on this hiatus, like, and I do mean immediately, like in the fucking in the octagon, like right after the fight, he's saying like, yeah, I got to step away, and it's like, oh, so you're ducking this guy you just kind of robbed in some people's eyes or got kind of lucky against with the scorecards. That was a bad look. If Pierre had left before that, if Pierre had left like after that last trio of wins where he beat Jake Shields, Carlos Condit, and Nick Diaz, where he's beating Strikeforce and WEC champions like back to back to back, and was on that great win streak. If he had just left then, where like all of his last like 12 wins or something were just utterly dominant, like I think people would have liked that more. Sure, you'd have some people being like, but I still would have liked to have seen him fight Hendricks or fight Lawler or fight whomever. You'd still see that, fight Ellenberger, fight McDonald, whatever. I know they were teammates, but like you'd still hear people say that. But I think overall people would have been like higher on Georges St-Pierre than they were when he, won a very, very nip-tuck fight against Hendricks and immediately bounced and like didn't fight him again, right? That's the sort of situation I think Islam is in. I think Islam like beat JDM and he looked very dominant, and in his fights prior to that he had looked very dominant, right? He's like I said in another video, he finished all of his previous 8 opponents at lightweight. I know that he decisioned Volk in the first fight, but he finished him in the rematch, right? So he has finished all 8 of his last opponents. And then, just kind of shuts out JDM. If he left on that high note, there would still be questions, right? Like, people like me would be questioning it. Like, I made a video after JDM lost to Carlos Praches, and I titled that video something to the effect of, has JDM tarnished Islam's resume or legacy? And people got mad about it, but all I was saying was like, look, JDM is clearly not the top guy at welterweight, and he's the only win Islam has. How meaningful is that championship win? Is this not unlike George St. Pierre winning a middleweight title in his low and middleweight fight against Michael Bisping of all fucking people? You know what I mean? So that's what I was saying, and that would still be true, and people like me would still be saying that, but I think the overall public opinion would be like, oh my God, look at Islam. He was so unbeatable. Like, he could have beaten anybody. We can get to see him fight absolutely everyone, but my God, just look how he performed against the people he did. And if he left with everyone having that impression, again, I feel like people kind of fill in the blanks a little, and they say like, well, sure, he never beat Garry, but he would have mauled Garry. That would be sort of the more common than not thought process. And, it's a real phenomenon. It's not fair. Like, you shouldn't get credit for that shit. Khabib Nurmagomedov should not get credit for the fact that he looked like he could have kept winning. Because I would favor him. I would favor him to beat Charles Oliveira, the kind of big name on the come up he didn't face. I would favor him to beat Tony, even if they fought a couple of years prior when Tony still had it. Like, I would favor him in these fights, but we didn't actually see him do it. He doesn't get credit for it. He gets credit for what he did. And what he did was terrific, and he's like in the GOAT conversation and like the kind of top 10 or something is Khabib. But these guys, your John Joneses, your Pierres, your Khabibs, potentially your Islam here, depending on when he retires, they're going to get favorable treatment and favorable viewing so long as they end on top. And in Islam's case, it's the more nuanced situation of like, he's still on top, but now his position seems shakier, right? Like, whereas if he just left after beating JDM, he would still leave a lot wanting as far as like proving without a shadow of a doubt that he could take out everybody. But the people he'd taken out up to that point, he'd looked so successful against that people will naturally lean his direction in predictions, right? Like, just look at the discussion ahead of the Garry fight. Some people, me, picked Garry, and some people more than me were saying that it would be close, that Garry had like good things to offer Islam, but some huge chunk of the public just assumed Islam was going to run him over. You know what I mean? Whereas now it's like, oh, can he beat Morales? Can he beat Praches? Like, he's sort of a pretender to the throne now, If he left now, I feel like that would be the impression. And if he sticks around and fucking loses, God forbid, right? Like, if he loses his next fight to someone like a Morales or a Praches, like, I'll still have him as the GOAT, but I think most people are going to drop him down, even though he's got the same fucking wins. And he's not, like, in his prime anymore. And he's up a fucking weight class, right? So that's all I've got on that. Just sort of a peculiar situation where, yes, you can't win for losing sometimes. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't sometimes. And sometimes you get more credit for doing less, actually. So long as you do it in style and leave everyone feeling happy. It's kind of my too long didn't read message here. So let me know what you think about that down below. Are you picking up what I'm putting down here as far as this phenomenon? And do you think it's what's happening right now with Islam? Do you also get the impression that people were like just more glowing in their assessment and praise for Islam before this win than they are after? Do you agree with that? In any case, like if you have not, subscribe if you have not, check out my other YouTube channel if you have not. It's called Michael Walsh Nerd Stuff. I will link it down in the description box. On that channel, I talk about nerd stuff. I talk about comic books, video games, anime, sci-fi, all that kind of shit. If you're interested in that kind of shit, go check it out. If not, no worries, just stick around here. But in any case, take care.